And you are watching the condition of the state speech from Governor Kim Reynolds. That is her third condition of the state speech in front of the Iowa General Assembly. She outlined several of her biggest priorities for lawmakers to tackle this session. As she'll, of course, it's a team effort between the governor, the House, and the Senate. Included in her goals are increasing the workforce in our state. She wants to do that by addressing child care needs, licensing reforms, restoring a felon's right to vote through a constitutional amendment. Then she also discussed education funding, more funding for water quality and conservation, cutting income taxes, mental health funding, many other issues. Many of those issues are issues that she has discussed and that the leaders in both the House and Senate have said are their priorities as well. Those leaders being Republican leadership because, of course, Republicans have the majority in the House, Senate, and they have the governor's office. Now, we heard the governor say that she wants to add more money for flood relief because so many of our farmers have been impacted. Take a listen to what she had to say.
To those lives who have been impacted, your state stands with you as you work and we work to return life to normal and get your homes, businesses, and communities back on track. To do that, the budget I'm submitting today includes an additional $20 million for flood relief.
$20 million for flood relief. Again, that's something that she'll submit this budget to the House and Senate, and then the House and Senate will come up with their own proposals, and then they'll hopefully find some common ground. So these are all of Governor Reynolds' proposals to the legislature to then work through and come up with, again, some common ground there. So another issue we heard the governor talk about is funding for mental health. Specifically, they need to fund the Children's Mental Health Program. 2 years ago, they reformed adult mental health in our state. Last year, they started a children's mental health system in our state. But as we've heard from many of the advocates for children's mental health, the key here has been to fund children's mental health and find some sort of funding stream that we can rely on for many years to come. Many of this different areas of our state rely upon property tax levies in order to pay for mental health, which is something not many states do across the country. So take a listen to what Governor Reynolds' proposal is on mental health funding.
Now we must provide predictable funding. To date, property taxpayers have supplied most of that support through their county to the local mental health regions. I'm proposing through the Invest in Iowa Act that we reduce property tax levies and provide the needed funding through the state general fund. No parent, family member, or friend should be told that treatment isn't available for their loved one. And by establishing a dedicated and stable fund for mental health will give hope to so many who are suffering in silence. It's a promise we made, and it is a promise I intend to keep.
Now, of course, that's an issue that we've heard from Republicans on both sides of the House and Democrats, as well as many advocates say is very important to them. That is a key issue that they want to see addressed this session. Now, our own Rachel Droz was in the room during the speech, and she has reaction from lawmakers across both sides of the aisle. Rachel, what were you hearing at the end of that speech as it wrapped up?
Well, there was a lot of talk about felon rights, felon voting rights specifically, but I want to start by kind of taking a step back to the beginning. Now, overall, lawmakers seem to receive her speech well today, the entire address. Of course, there were some points where Democrats were not applauding while Republicans were, but that's to be expected with the Republican majority in both chambers and also in the governor's office. But one of her main policy announcements today, a proposal for a new law that she says will set Iowa on a path of prosperity for the next decade.
My request to this General Assembly is that you join me in taking the first bold step right now, this session. In the coming weeks, I'll be introducing the Invest in Iowa Act, a bill that will significantly cut income taxes,
Now, of course, Ethanol is another big topic of discussion here. She also touched on renewable fuels in her speech today. Take a listen.
I will always be a relentless advocate for our farmers and our producers and our very way of life, which is why today I'm calling for an additional $2 million for the Renewable Fuels Infrastructure Program, as well as modernizing and expanding the E15 promotion tax credit. This will support the sale of E15 year-round and drive domestic demand for our homegrown renewable fuels.
Now, the Invest in Iowa plan would also reduce property tax burdens. It would fund the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Trust. It would also further the 2018 tax law that laid out a plan to gradually cut income taxes in the state of Iowa. Now, under this plan that she laid out today, the maximum income tax rate would be 5.5% by 2023. That is the statewide sales tax, or income tax, sorry. The current law, which was set in place in 2018, would set the maximum of the income tax rate to 6.5% by 2023. Now, the proposed Invest in Iowa Act would also invest in mental health care. And Sarah, do we have that soundbite pulled up? Oh, looks like we're going to be talking about broadband. So that, of course, something that she's already made major investments in throughout her tenure as governor. She says that that is not enough. She wants more. Take a listen.
Broadband is not a luxury. It's critical infrastructure. From the farmer checking crop conditions to the Main Street business participating in the 24/7 marketplace, connectivity should be the expectation no matter where you live.
Now, of course, education is another big area that Reynolds has tackled during her tenure as governor. No different. She's planning on proposing major investments to education yet again, both pre-K through 12 and some college funding. Take a listen.
In 2019, we made historic investments in K-12 education with over $90 million in new money, including an increase in per-pupil funding and transportation equity. The budget I'm presenting today makes another historic investment with over $103 million in new funding so that Iowa schools can maintain the best teachers and classrooms in the world.
Now, childcare, of course, we've all heard of childcare cliffs. There are some issues nationally pretty much with childcare, access to that and funding levels for that. So Reynolds did lay out a plan to tackle both of those issues with relating to childcare. Take a listen.
First, let's make childcare more affordable by expanding the early childhood tax credits. Currently, they're available to families making $45,000 or less, and I am recommending that be doubled to $90,000. Second, we must begin to address the child care cliff so that hang on there, okay, I agree. So we're not punishing parents as they continue on a path to self-sufficiency. To do this, we should implement a tiered co-pay system that doesn't punish those who work hard enough to earn a raise. Finally, we need to enlist Iowans to find common sense solutions that increase access to child care.
Now, another main focus today, criminal justice reform, that has been a pillar of Reynolds' platform since becoming governor. She renewed her calls for restoring felon voting rights to convicted felons, pointing out one specific man in the crowd. I think we have that soundbite pulled up for you guys at home.
I recently called William to tell him that I was restoring his voting rights, and hearing those words brought tears to his eyes. You cannot imagine the gratitude and dignity that Iowans like William feel when they're told that they can once again exercise what Ronald Reagan called the crown jewel of American liberties. William, please stand so that we can recognize your efforts to become an active and productive citizen of this great state.
William got a lot of applause. The whole issue about the criminal justice reform got quite a bit of applause from both sides of the aisle today during her address. But for now, I'm going to send things back to you, Sabrina. And for now, live at the Capitol, Rachel Droz, Local 5 News. We're Iowa.